Hi, I'm Pierce Brunson of Modern Photography Group, and this is another shoot review. And today's shoot review is going to be part two of the sports photography one that I did a couple of days ago. So this is part two. Went back out and shot it. Shot a different, same sport, different times, different settings, and to give us an idea of how we can deliver things consistency. But first, before we get into all the stuff in the video, all the stuff on the good information pad here, I want you to subscribe down there below to Modern Photography Group here on YouTube. Then flip on over if you're on Pinterest. We're over there, Modern Photography Group, or if you get that like at Modern Photog, okay, there. And then if you go on over to Facebook, we're over there at Modern Photography Group, all the way. So then from there, kick on over to Instagram. We're also on Twitter and all that other stuff. You can find us there, all the same. Just keep typing in our name. Firefly Event Photography on Twitter and Instagram, and Pierce Brunson, I think it's Pierce B Photo on Twitter, but Pierce Brunson Photography on Instagram. We're all there with our thing. So follow us at all those locations there, and you'll get a lot of information, a lot of samples of what we do. So let's get back to the video. Now the video is this is part two of the sports photo action shoot that I did a couple of days ago. So I shot a flag football tournament. So I'm in Tampa, Florida, and I shot high school sports, and what happened was it was my first time really concentrating on high school sports for an end product that other people would enjoy. Most of the time I just kind of went out there with my camera and wasn't really, just shooting and capturing whatever. But now we're trying to produce an end product. So the key was to find out what settings were going to be best for the kit that we have. So if you didn't see that video, I'll review the kit that we have here. So we shoot the Canon 6D, and this is the 70 by 200 ISUSM. This is the 2, okay? From there, this is what we were set up with to shoot the action sports. So when we first went out in the first video, we were kind of all over the place, and we also used auto ISO. And I watched a couple of videos about using auto ISO and some suggestions there. Now, here's part of the issue that I ran into, is that auto ISO became like a sort of a mental trust block for me, because on the back of the camera, when I would look at what auto ISO delivered, it was a little too dark for where I wanted the starting point of my photography. So when you take a picture, that's kind of the starting point of your photography before you put it in, before you do any post-production. Now we do very minimal post-production, but still I like to see where we're at 98% of what we really want on the back. So so I didn't like the auto ISO settings. And then I was messing around with the shutter speed, and it had a little blur, and I was flipping around on the sidelines, and that hindered me from being just worrying about shooting and capturing images as opposed to trying to figure out the light. So that was that in that first video. And in this one, what I decided to do was go out and shoot 2 more times. Now, the issue with the last 2 times that I had was the games were at 6:30, so it's really bright, and the sun is about like right here, and then it comes down toward the end of the game. So one side of the field is really lit. The moment that you turn the other way, you're going to get the kids running towards you, but their face is going to be shadowed. So those were the 2 things we had. Now, these were games without lights, so they didn't turn on the lights yet. Now, and they weren't going to turn on the lights because it was just short games. Now, when they have later games, when they start at 7:30, they're already going to have the lights there. So you're going to get that sun to come down, and then the stadium lights to kind of level out the situation, which is going to be a little bit more consistent light. And we're going to be shooting one of those this week. So there'll be a part 3 of this. Now, what I wanted to do coming out the second time was I wanted to shoot consistently at a shutter speed to capture still photography, still the stop motion, and I also wanted to shoot consistently at an aperture, so that when I changed lenses to the 100 to 400, which I talked about in the first video of where we're stepping forward, I didn't want to have to make too many adjustments. I just wanted adjustments on the length and that I needed. So in this one, I shot 500 shutter speed and 7.1 on the aperture. Now with the ISO, I didn't use auto ISO. I controlled my own ISO. And so I knew I had a couple of times because I do have experience with this, with some sunsets and things like that. So I started at 100, and for the first half of the game, I was in between 100 on my ISO and 400. Okay, and then at the end of the game, without lights, I had to crank it up to about 5,000 on my ISO. Okay, so in the description, I'm gonna leave the link to the slideshow that we did from the game, but I'm also at the end of this video going to put in some samples from when the game started all the way to the end, and you can see the difference in lighting that we had to deal with. But overall, consistently, we had a consistent product by shooting this way this time. So the biggest thing I wanted to do was make sure that as we shift equipment, the equipment being the lens itself, is that we continue to produce a consistent product. Now, of course, with different lenses, you're going to get different sharpness, different nuances and things like that. But overall, we wanted to be able to capture the same thing. So that's why I started practicing at these particular settings here. And we're always going to use this type of lens from Canon so that we have a consistent change and shift. Not really an inconsistent. We're not going to go backwards on lenses. So we're always going to move forward. So that's the thing there. Again, I was set up on the monopod. On this one, again, the monopod is from either a Walmart or Best Buy, and it was about $40 there. So the biggest thing that I found from this particular shoot was with the 500 and a 7.1 at a couple of times, I think I shifted to 8.0 on the aperture. We were more consistent and things were sharper. Okay. Number two, when I got to the point where I was starting to fiddle around a little bit, that's when my nerves kind of increased in the game, and my effectiveness of shooting wasn't as sharp as it needed to be. That was just a small moment in the game, and then I realized, no, we're going to stay on aperture. We're not going to fiddle around. We're going to stick with these settings here. So then I just started moving along the ISO, and once I did that, then I could worry about the game itself. So for me, this is the formula that I found that works. And again, we're in Tampa Bay area, Florida, with a lot of sun here. So 500 at 7.1 with this type of setup, the Canon 6D and the 70 by 200. Also, we did use the lens hood for that shoot also. So those are the consistent things that I found with this shoot. Things were a lot better. You're going to see some slides at the end of this, some images at the end of what we shot. Again, when we go into post-production, the one thing that I'm really not used to as a photographer, because with my photography, I take what's in the camera and I don't crop. It's just one of my things. I'm kind of a what you see is what you get type of shooter. But with these images, because I'm far away, I have to crop a lot of these. So I crop them in the Canon Photo Suite program there, and just process them that way. It's a real simple process for us. So that's what I did. Now, the biggest thing about using this lens and why I want to move to the 100 to 400 is right about now we're only using about 40 to 60% of the photo image. Like, I mean, there's a huge area that we crop out on these images because we're just so far back. We're getting the action, but we're far back. So my personal belief is that once we get to 100 to 400, we'll be a little bit tighter and maybe only be dealing with 25% that we're cutting off, just cutting off the just some of the extra edges that just show up, like the inch or so, that we can start to get rid of. So that's the big thing there with the length and the 100 to 400 cannon that we're going to get. So again, this was just our shoot on this. Try these settings when you're out there and make sure it's a lot of light, especially if you're shooting a soccer, lacrosse, and all, and tackle football. If your tackle football is during the day, you can shoot this. Now, another thing, I was on the sidelines, so don't try to shoot this from the stands. You do have to have some proximity. Yes, the 70 to 200 is a masterful lens, but shooting it from the stands, it's just too many barriers in between you and the field itself. So where I shoot is I shoot outside of the coach's box area, which theirs in flag football is between the 20 and the other 20, and then I shoot from the 20 to the end zone and the back of the end zone and around. So that's kind of my zone there to get it. So if it's on the other side of the field, I have to really zoom in, or I have to hustle down and get an angled shot. No big deal, but that's just kind of how you have to do it. You have to be in proximity of the field. So when you're shooting these other sports, make sure you're in proximity to the field. With flag football, I kind of know it, and not a lot of action comes 15 yards off the field, where they're flowing so much. So I'm usually about 5 to 8 yards off the field when I'm in the back of the end zone, and they're coming to the end zone because the angles are a little sharper, and you need to be a little bit closer. You can get really tight with the 70 to 200. I back off about 15 yards from the back of the end zone there. Okay, so so that's the case with that. Again, hopefully that these settings, which is 500 on the shutter speed, 7.1 or 8 on the aperture, and 100 to 400 in the daylight itself, and then probably up to 500 on the Canon 6D on the ISO, 100 to 400 on the ISO. In the daylight, you can get some great sharp images, and put on that auto and the AI servo focus, and just let that thing go to work and worry about the game itself and get some great images. So I'm Pierce Brunson for Modern Photography Group. Appreciate your time. In the questions below, and it's in the comments below, you can ask any questions that are pertinent to shooting sports here in St. Petersburg or Tampa Bay, Florida, and I can give you some tips of what I'm doing personally and how I'm shooting. I'll put some images at the end of this, but follow us, subscribe here, follow us over on Facebook, and over on Instagram, Modern Photography Group. Firefly Event Photography, you can see it in the background. Pierce Brunson Photography, PIERCEBRUNSON Photography over on Instagram, and we'll go from there. Thank you.